StickStar Report 2.0 live from the live-ish from the StickStar HQ adjacent to the StickStar Pro Shop in the Toka Training Center in lovely historic Carrollton, and I'm joined today by two of my friends. Kyle, how are we doing today?
It's all good. We've got Nick Ossello in the house. Just happens to be in town.
My girlfriend lives here, which is a big,
flex. That's a big flex.
Many of you listening probably don't have girlfriends.
Yeah.
Could never be me.
Right. No, that makes sense. Yep, so girlfriend's in town. What's the relationship there?
Well, she's my girlfriend.
Yeah, I know.
So
It's a good place to
Any
start.
relationship to Texas lacrosse?
Her brother, Michael Ferrara, is a star defensive midfielder, which is an oxymoron. And I made it a point when I set out this year to not say any defensive midfielders' names on podcasts. You got to know your role. You're not a guy whose name needs to be said. You're a faceless player who thrives with being unrecruited, underdeveloped, underserved. So I'm going to break that rule to stay in the good graces of my girlfriend and say that Michael Ferrara is on 3-0 Merrimack. Watch out. It's a wagon alert, and I'm excited to be following along. No Notre Dame, but a respectable program, off to a good start.
Yeah, pumped to have you here, Nick.
And
Thanks.
I don't tell kids to be good boyfriends if I don't set the example myself. So give her brother a little shout out, say I'm in town for her. So putting my money where my mouth is.
Mikey Ferrara is an incredibly tough and skilled and over-recruited athlete. So I will not have any of this Mikey Ferrara blasphemy while we're sitting at this glorious table for the StickStar Report. So with the StickStar Report, one of the things we wanted to do was we wanted to bring people in to join the discussion, right? Like, we wanted to actually talk to people and discuss things, and we couldn't have picked a better guest
First
to start
guest.
it out with.
All right,
You know what I mean?
yes, love that.
It's a great spot to be in. What should we talk about?
Let's talk about program health and how we sustain, right? I feel like, Nick, you've kind of been all over the country. You've helped out a lot of different programs. We'll get into what you're doing with Second Slide and all of that. But you've coached, consulting, guest coaching, whatever you want to call it, with a lot of programs in, I guess, non-traditional areas. And I think that some of the challenges that the public programs here in Texas face maybe aren't unique just to Texas.
Well, it's interesting for a number of reasons. So, one, I'm gonna, if you are aware of who I am, I generally try to make light and jokes of 99% of every conversation. For the sake of this podcast, I'll do my best to actually put on a little bit of a serious face, because to your point, I do think that the things that we're going to be talking about are more of a serious nature, and I'll sprinkle in a joke here or there. But what we started out doing in 2018 with a couple Notre Dame buddies, Matt Kavanaugh, Connor McCullough, and then also
Never heard of him.
Brent Adams, who's one of my good buddies, is we were kind of fed up just with any job. I don't like having a boss. I don't like having a corporate job. And we decided to start a company called Clinic Sports, which was, let's get a van, let's put beds in it, and let's pretty much just get shit talked about us behind our back as we were living in a van down by the river. But Brent and I would travel around in this van, and the reason that we did that is because we didn't want to pay for flights, hotel rooms, rental cars, and charge $300 a head for clinics. So we had this van life meets coaching, and we did operate primarily in places like Wyoming, Montana, Washington, Seattle, Oregon. Well, I guess Washington in general, not just Seattle. Places like Louisiana, we worked in Alabama, Tennessee, even Texas, Colorado. So we've been to a lot of different places. So what we're going to be talking about, and what you just mentioned, is the problems, unfortunately, we noticed aren't geographic restraints. The problems that public schools in Texas are facing are very likely going to be similar to the problems in my current home city of Boise, Idaho, and Brent's current city of Bend, Oregon, or wherever that's not named Long Island or Baltimore. So just going in with that background is like, we did work with a shitload of programs, very happily to do so, in a number of different roles, but I think you nailed it, hit the nail on the head right there.
So, one of the biggest issue with the school programs usually tend to operate a little differently, but the public programs, they have issue with corporate memory. As the boards turn over, all of the insight and understanding and intelligence that goes around that program, it's hard to maintain that unless you just have this incredible internal system where you get to keep all of this data, right? It's very difficult to transfer that from one board to the next, and that's why you see so many programs are cyclical, right? One program has a great run, then there's some turnover, a lot of expectations, the grades aren't the same. It's just tough to sustain it. And a lot of that has to do with the corporate memory of these programs. So with StickStar Report, what we're trying to do, we're trying to help with that. What's the resource, right? Where do you go to find that information? We're gonna try to start to address that issue, and I think that this conversation is the initial conversation. There's gonna be lots of them. We'll probably have this conversation later down the line with Nick, and with boards, whatever, but we have to have it, and we have to start to get this stuff all fleshed out, because just with the program I'm with, Plano West, you look at program health, the people that are there are really fighting hard to sustain this program health, and it's difficult, and this is the issue with tons of programs across the state, because we've communicated with tons of parents across the state, so it's just a tough situation. And when you talk about growing the game, it sounds great, but it's hard, and a lot of people are investing a lot of time, so we want to just kind of work on that.
It's a great, I really like that phrase, corporate memory, just because that of everything that we've identified as, if we're on a board, if we're working with an area, like just doing a preliminary diagnosis of what are the problems. A lot of it goes back to, through nobody's fault of their own, general disorganization, or there's no structure moving forward. And there's that saying, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. And I think that plays into the lacrosse community way more heavily, because if you look at the incentives of the parents, they want their kid to win state in Idaho, and I'll be referencing Idaho a lot, but just know that it's applicable to Texas, to Wyoming, everywhere. But these parents and these boards in Idaho, generally speaking, want their kids to have the best 4 years of high school lacrosse that they have, and then they're done, and then they're good. So a lot of the decisions that are made are optimized around short-term success at the expense of long-term growth. Because once their kid's in college and either playing club, or if he goes to play D2 or D3, potentially D1, they're not going to have time.
It might not even be at the expense it's just it's not even on the radar. It's not of their concern. They're not we'll do this, and then whatever happens, it could just be this is my focus, and then we're just trying to guide the ship, and passing the baton is not necessarily a consideration, because it's a second job to prepare all of this information, right? This program-based information to pass on to the next group. There's some of it, but it's hard to nail it across the board.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really difficult, is these boards are run, by parents who have careers as volunteers to try and make the experience as good as they can for their son and his immediate group of buddies that also play, that they probably had a huge hand in recruiting to get into the sport, right? And then maybe the class above and the class below, right? And so it's typically going to be controlled by 2 or 3 years of players right? And everything's going to be focused on them, and then, like you said, it kind of turns over without, once they get into high school, are they focused on backfilling and helping the youth program that they just matriculated out of continue to grow their numbers and see whatever success that group had? And I think naturally it's super easy to just kind of let that go as your son matriculates up. And while you're in it, right, we talk about the pandemic being so great for us, being able to work kind of on it instead of just being in it. Like, it was a necessary pause. While you're in it, it's really hard to work on it and put the structure and these processes in place. And I think it's super important that the parent boards that are involved in running programs like really start to try and have a notebook that's a playbook that they can say, here you go.
Right. Well, so two things there. One, yes, like it's the parents being incentivized to make their kids' experience good, I think, is through no fault of their own difficult to, okay, I just got done with my job of tech sales or, doing whatever it is. All right, let me just go volunteer an hour or two a night. Like what parent is thinking like, what I actually want to do is I want to spend like 2 or 3 hours at least laying the foundation of this date, start to think about schedules. This date, start to think about when you're going to put in a jersey order. This date, start to think about apparel for your community. This date, start to think about registration. What platform are we going to use registration on? And one of the things that we're finding before I dive into kind of like what we're doing at Second Slide is, if nothing else, like having a playbook of something as simple as this is the software we use for registration and payment processing, and you just need to designate a parent to update the website, otherwise you're going to be fielding 500 emails. It's not even a matter of like growing the game, it's a matter of making those volunteer hours infinitely more valuable, because it's going to take 10 minutes of checking what's existing instead of starting your board position Googling what payment process system should we use for registration, what lacrosse jersey companies are there. It just becomes so meticulous, and a parent like my dad, and I think of my dad who was my coach and probably on boards. I didn't care to know the boards when I was in 4th grade, but he didn't know the first thing about lacrosse. He was from Montana, and now he thinks he knows more than me, which you don't, Dad, by the way. But him starting from scratch versus him having even an outline, like the guardrails of which you should operate, is honestly one of the most important things to our sport moving forward. And you mentioned it earlier, but grow the game is a bastardized term. I'm starting to become like a grumpy old guy. Like, don't say that when you're running $500 clinics in Baltimore and Long Island back to back.
It's just stock.
It's over. Yeah.
Yeah.
Grow the game's over. It's on the burden of proof if you're using that to actually back it up. Until then, until I know you're using that term, I don't even want to hear it. So that's my old guy get off my lawn rant.
Yeah, I mean, do you see, what we're talking about? We have kind of intimate knowledge of different programs that we've coached at here in the state. Do you see this as an issue, what we're talking about? I mean, like is this
Nationwide.
everywhere?
Yeah,
Like,
very much so. So the pandemic for us, we were running a traveling social gathering company.
Yeah.
That doesn't do so hot in a global pandemic when both of those things become illegal overnight. So not only did we just get absolutely kicked in the balls financially, but we kind of had to sit there and go, what on earth do we do now? Like the crux of our business was just taken for a bat. And what we ended up doing was just calling all, like, I don't know, the 250 programs that we worked with. And we just said, honestly, bitch to us. What's wrong outside of the pandemic, historically, with your time in the lacrosse community? What's been going wrong? And it came back to a couple different areas of identification. One, generally speaking, apparel's a nightmare. Like, we got to do jerseys. Like, it just becomes this task.
I got a guy for that.
Who's that?
Myself.
That's what I'm talking about. Fundraising is a nightmare. You have to have manual inputs every year. You have to either go palms up to high net worth individuals within the community. You have to give your kids candy bars and send them into the community. but it requires effort every year to get the funding to operate. And then the third was a general misunderstanding of how the board operates and what the path is moving forward and where the team was earlier. So every program being different is, I firmly believe that it's tough to paint with a wide brush. But after a lot of these conversations, we just ended up saying, like, apparel fundraising and boards are 95% of the very first pain points. We would just say what is generally a pain in the ass. Leading off, those three were like 95% reception rates, which led to us having an opportunity. But going back to answer your question, it's not just a problem in Texas,
Right.
And it's not just a problem in Idaho. It's a problem with the entire sport. And what's, I think, the beautiful part of this, and it's why I'm glad you guys are doing even something like opening up a discussion on this podcast, we're going to identify the work, and I assume that you guys are going to at least take a stab at this board turnover, at this level that is going to have a much more tangible impact on a kid than even what we were doing with, a cool clinic with PLL players to juice them up for a day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is everything that we want this to be. When we start out doing things like understanding the complete direction of what will transpire, it's tough. If you would have asked us, even 10 years ago, would we be sitting in this office like here at the beautiful Toka Training Center in historic Carrollton? Like, no clue, right? But just the discussion that we're having initially, just you talking about what are the pain points, right? Like, we haven't communicated with over 200 plus programs, but all of these pain points make sense, right? So why isn't there a rubric? If you look at a league's rule book, right, they will talk to you about a million different things that they legislate. This guy can't live here. This is when you submit all of these things that are great, for a competition, but who is saying this is how you grow your program, this is how you sustain your program, this is how you maintain program health, these are the issues that you're having, and that just doesn't exist really, right? So when you talk about the steps that need to be taken, I think that this is an incredibly important first step, right, in the right direction. And we've always wanted to be a resource for lacrosse in the state, and now, potentially beyond just the borders of the state. So this is a great place to start, and that's why we're doing this. We want to lead the discussion. We want to lead this discussion of how you really grow the game.
So, yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
just with growing the game, that was kind of my next question, because, I believe, as a youth director, one of my major, barometers for am I doing my job successfully is just, numbers in our program. Are we growing our numbers? Are we sustaining our player numbers, right? Just sustaining is hard enough, right? Just sustaining youth numbers year to year is difficult. Growing them is very difficult as well. I'm curious.
Retaining them,
yeah,
is the last piece.
yeah, and I'm just curious, what have you seen to be successful in some of these other programs, and how they are addressing, actually getting new players to the sport? What actually has worked? Kind of, obviously, again, broad brush, but
Yeah, and COVID throwing everything for a loop makes it difficult to use the data that we had starting from 2019 to current. It's we can only guess as to the impact that something like COVID had.
sure.
But coming out of it, I think there are two things that generally get neglected, and that's the connection between the high school and the youth programs, and that's making it fun for the parents as well. So option A, the connection to the high school and the youth program. I think that every high school program should have a youth night either once a season or twice a season. Let's get all the bobbleheads, let's line them up across the 50-yard line at the big varsity game under the Friday night 7 p.m. lights. Let's show them, and again, I often reference my youth. Let's show them with the Wheat Ridge High School helmet under the lights, standing next to a guy that you were looking up to who probably was dog shit at lacrosse, but that didn't matter. You just saw the WR and you were part of the, the mini storm. And you're in 3rd grade, but you get to run out there at midfield at the Friday night lights game with, 1,000 parents in the stand. Like, wow, something to achieve, because that's inherent in every other sport. After a youth football game, they go home and watch the NFL. They go home and watch college football. Lacrosse still doesn't have that, ooh, I want to be the next guy. Well, start at the local level. Start by having them idolize the high school players. Something as simple as that. And then the second is make it fun for the parents. Lacrosse is more accessible now than it ever has been, meaning that you don't have to wait until Memorial Day weekend to watch a college lacrosse game on TV. See the college lacrosse schedule, see your schedule for games, and rent out an area of a brewery and have a happy hour for the parents after a youth lacrosse game where there's Duke Hopkins on, where there's, selfishly Notre Dame Denver, where there's any lacrosse game on. Get the parents, like, lacrosse dads love beer, lacrosse moms love wine, like, get them into a room and make it fun for them so that when they're just shooting the shit at work come Monday, how was your weekend? Oh God, I had 3 youth soccer games and, the parents were getting in a fight on the sideline and this and that. And then they hear, well, we had this great youth lacrosse game, or even bad youth lacrosse game, but we all went and we had a bunch of beers and there was this cool lacrosse game on and the kids were running around and it was a blast. So those 2 things are like the easiest, like lowest hanging fruit that we found of tangible success or retention from the youth side. Ooh, I want to keep playing to go be that high school player. And from the parent side, I want to go because I enjoy having a beer and shooting the shit.
Right.
So we know you, right?
Allegedly.
Not
everything.
On paper. But, one of the first things that we did was we kind of just did a getting to know you from a StickStar standpoint. And some of the players are like, hey, I learned a lot, right? So tell us, in 500 words or less, your story, right? You come from a non-traditional area, right? You went and played Division I lacrosse, and now you are on
football.
And football.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will.
And now you are on your path. So why don't you just, briefly tell us about that, and then we'll kind of get into the other stuff.
Yeah, so grew up in a town called Wheat Ridge, Colorado, decent suburb west of Denver, and went to Wheat Ridge High School. If you're familiar with Colorado lacrosse at all, there's the Cherry Creeks, there's the Kent Denvers. We would be good enough to make it to the playoffs and then just get absolutely smoked by one of those 2 teams. I played for Denver Elite. And, I think it's worth calling out too, like, I got unbelievably lucky. Not only to have parents that were willing to make a financial commitment to send me back out east as a part of this Denver Elite team, but also that, I just inherently loved sports and competing and everything like that. So that led me on a path to get recruited to a number of different colleges. I was generally recruited as a guy that's like, you kind of don't really know what you're doing, but you're fast and you're a football player, and we could turn you into a lacrosse player. So I ended up committing to Notre Dame. I played 4 years under Coach Corrigan and Coach Byrne, which I think was the best 2-headed monster of college coaching. Byrne defensively, Corrigan offensively. Was an All-American. We never won it. We got there twice. Played a year of football after that on Notre Dame. After graduating, I was working a corporate job as a supply chain consultant while I played for the Colorado Mammoth and Denver Outlaws. When everything got shooken up, I played for the PLL Redwoods for 3 years, and now I run a company called Second Slide, and I'm a broadcaster. and have done all kinds of shit along the way. I was the defensive coordinator at Air Force for a year. I was working
know
for an
that.
apparel company
Yeah.
for a year. I was running Clinic Sports before we rebranded into Second Slide. I played for the SEALs for a year. I worked for the SEALs media department. Important in your 20s to figure out what you're good at, what you're bad at, what you like to do, what you don't like to do. And for the first time ever, I'm like, you know what? I don't think I need to travel and be a shit show. I think I know what I want to do in this lacrosse community that I ordered the sampler platter for in my 20s as I stare 30 in the face. So.
Well, I mean, that's I would say like brevity is the soul of wit, and you did that about as briefly as we could have expected. So again, let's hit the reset. We're trying to discuss program memory and how you make programs better, and I think that Second Slide does some unique things. So why don't you go ahead and like tell us about what you do?
Yeah, so in that, identifying that apparel, fundraising, and like the board, just general board issues, we realize that no one's taken a real stab at a new approach in a lot of years. It's a lot of people fighting over the right to sell to a lacrosse community. Meanwhile, that community sees no benefit. And something like a case of balls, for example. Case of balls has margin built into it. Whatever company is getting it at a certain price, marking it up, and then selling it to a lacrosse community. That middleman used to have a very real, tangible, you are the corner store of your community. You need to go to this store, and this store needs to make a profit. Now that things are online, that middleman becomes significantly less valuable. All they're doing is finding the source, hiding that source from communities, and then marking it up. Like, if that's generally what we saw is, and I'll do my best not to name names, but some of these major online retailers just sucking a lot of value. So what we did, what we started to do was something with lacrosse balls. And there's this concept called group purchasing organization, which if you guys buy 10 cases of balls and we connect with 1,000 other teams buying 10 cases of balls, all of a sudden you have 10 million cases of balls or whatever. Like, all of a sudden that becomes a huge piece of leverage to take back to those initial suppliers and saying, listen, don't give us those 120 balls at $300. We want them at 150. In order to get that price, we will guarantee you 10 million cases or 10 million balls. Like, there's this inherent leverage that the lacrosse community has that no one's taken the time to organize and wield as a tool to benefit that very community. So we started with balls. Right now we have a price of 120 balls for $185. Relatively speaking, there's a way to beat that. Like, we have been beaten on price before. So finding the midpoint of quality and price is, I think important to us. And, we have these available in what we're calling our corner stores, which is, how many shirts and hoodies and just generic apparel. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. How much money is a community spending on that type of stuff? Well, they should be the main beneficiaries. So the guys who I was running Clinic Sports with are very software. They're software guys. So we actually started this subscription service where you pay us a yearly fee. We manage a store for you, and you keep the profits of things that your mom, your dad, a pint glass, just a good breadth of merchandise that historically has benefited someone who didn't care about the teams, and now the community gets to be their own middleman. So that's, in a sense, what we do, and I could go on 100 different tangents, but I think that's the best way to keep it concise.
They're buying a membership for you guys to handle, and then they take all the margin.
Yeah.
On the.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And
awesome.
Again, starting with balls, we offer balls in all of our store. Like, that's how we started, and we're encouraging teams. As I'm sure you guys have found, it's difficult to find business when the economy has just been kind of raking these teams over the coals. Like, we reach out and we say, hey, we're doing something new with the store, and they're like, let me guess, shit's gonna be 5 months late, I'm not gonna hear from you when there's problems. Let me guess, you don't even have a lacrosse background, you're just some guy in a New York office. Like, the initial pushback we get, I think, is very representative of how the lacrosse teams have been treated, because no one's taken kind of a, even, not even necessarily a new approach, but a customer first approach, we'll call it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I run into it in our team sales
it has to be.
all the time, and we're the beneficiaries of people that have gone other places and then found us, or I found them and started chatting with them, and it's like, you know, we're having conversations about how your program runs and how many kids are in your program, and, you know, I've done this, and this in the community as a coach or a youth director or something like that, and by the way, we're on time and correct, and like I'm the guy, like it's me, and then it goes to one other person, and we have a direct line of communication, so we've directly benefited in the team sales department from what you're talking about, right? Is people being late, it being wrong, not being able to get a call back or an answer back on a lot of this stuff, not being serviced, really.
Well, and even important to call out, one of the first interactions I had with you guys, I came and I coached all of the players in Texas, like out there on that field right over there. I know you can't see it through the wall, but like right over there, and then we went and had barbecue. And I'm like, even that is, I was walking away and I was like, damn, like that's somehow different, because that's seemingly rare.
Well, as you can tell on this podcast, we're authentic.
Yeah,
You know, like we're not
hot
going
takes,
to.
guys.
Yeah, we're not going to. We don't have to sugarcoat anything, because everything here is authentic, right? This is authenticity, emotion. It's real. It's not. It's not packaged. It's not, you know, stock. It's just, we're real people. We like to have real conversations. We're talking about real issues, and that's just what you're going to get, what you've always received when it comes to anything that StickStar is associated with. And, you know, we have people come and go, and, you know, we talk, and it's the first thing that we say, like, look, we're trying to have a real conversation. Like, we're not trying to fake it. We're trying to really do certain things, and that's how our interaction worked out, and that's why, you know, we continue to have like a relationship, because we're authentic people, and that's what we do.
Well, it's refreshing in a sense, and even like going and looking at the jerseys and the uniforms that you guys have. Again, behind that wall, right behind that wall, there's
StickStar Pro Shop.
all kinds of stuff. But like looking at that stuff, I'm like, damn. Like, first off, we're certainly, like, I'll tell people about this, and they'll be like, well, what about, like, aren't you trying? No, we're absolutely a symbiotic relationship, because we're not touching anything that you're trying to sell, and I'm not touching anything that, you know, and vice versa. So it just becomes like people want to do business with people that they like. And right now, we just crossed 100 teams, and right now what we're seeing is like we're starting to field requests for jerseys, which we don't have the capability to do. So like even right after this podcast, I'm gonna be like, hey guys, we're gonna need to connect you with a guy who's handling some of these team sourcing, because what we realized is we can handle one aspect, which is kind of what the moms and the dads, you know, we don't want to touch what the kids are wearing on the field, because I think that comes with a whole different process. Right now we just have comfortable stuff for your mom and dad to wear. Well, why wouldn't we be the ones to facilitate an easier purchase and not tell them where to buy it from, but at least act as somewhat of a concierge service of, oh, you like those guys?
A curator.
Honestly, I have no problem saying those guys haven't had a shipment that's been on time as long as we've known them. Or, listen, those guys, it's going to be on time. You'll get about 3 uses of that jersey before it's Swiss cheese. So like acting as a curator, concierge, like not telling people where to go, but giving them information that they can choose themselves. it's a fine line that we're walking, and we will continue to walk. But right now, we're just trying to act as information sources. So like, oh shit, we should have had this process more dialed in. Now the teams are looking at orders. And with us being less than a year old and having surpassed that, like we went to market in September-ish of last year.
Wow.
So we're like, all right, we're on to something. Like we process our checks on a quarterly basis and every team's making money. If they're making money, they are going to trust us, and that comes with an extreme amount of responsibility, because the last thing we want to do is get caught up in
Sure.
the things that give you business, which is that business.
Yeah. Yeah.
The wake of disaster.
Yeah.
Oh,
You want to
God,
be
it's-
on time and
it's a
correct.
nightmare. Well, I'm assuming, like, let me guess, in about a month from now, everybody's shit's gonna be late, and you guys are gonna be able to scoop up a decent amount of business when people are saying, hey, we had to play in our old jerseys from last year.
Yeah, I
First
mean,
game.
you know, that certainly happens. More often than not, right now, it's me getting on the phone and just contacting people, and asking them what their experience has been. Are they happy? If you're happy, then you know you're happy. If you're not happy, then you should give us a look, because typically the customers that we deal with and that we service don't go anywhere. Like we're getting orders again,
Their
season
retention
after
rate-
season
their retention
after
rate's
season.
crucial.
And I think it's, you know, one, our guy, he's on time and correct, and our manufacturing and our supply chain is just, it's really good. We just turned an order in like 11 days.
Mhm.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you're like, oh, 11 days, that's decent. That's not decent. That's
Well, it was
ridiculous.
like hey, we were short 20 sets. I need 20 more. We had our registration numbers blew up. I need 20 more. Okay. Give me like 3 weeks. I think I can get them to you in 3 weeks. No promises, but I think I can get them to you in 3 weeks. 11 days they hit here, they'll be there in 14. So like, again, because they can reach out and call me or text me at any hour, like I'm on. It's like you contact me at 10:30 and text me and I'm in front of my phone and
Yeah.
you need this, okay, send it to me. That thing's in manufacturing the next day, and 11 days later it's here. That's not on all orders, but like that is an example.
It can happen.
Yeah.
It can happen. And the intersection of quality, price, and turnaround time, it's hard. Like, you can get like 2 of them, but to get all 3 of them is something different. And
Well, how long have you been in business?
so this will be the 20th summer of us traveling teams.
Did you have all 3 of those for uniforms figured out in your first year? No.
No, and that's how this happened, right?
Yeah.
We were getting it from somebody else, and I was actually doing team sales, right? So like right out of school, and we're at Notre Dame team camp, right?
Unbelievable.
And we're
Great institution.
yeah, I love Notre Dame. But we're there, and our gear isn't on time, and it's wrong. And I'm talking to the guy, and I'm like, "Look, I do X amount of business. Like, what do we have to do to be a big deal? Like, what do we have to do to be on time?" And so then he stopped, and he started his own deal, and he's been manufacturing our gear ever since. And so that's like how it all played out. Like, that's the genesis of StickStar apparel. And we've come a long way from our first
Oh, yeah.
heavy tech mesh jerseys.
Oh, yeah?
But it's now, it's in a great spot. We manufacture great gear, and whether it's shorts or jerseys or different kinds of shorts or box gear, it's all put together pretty nice, and we're super happy. The first thing for us was, how do we get our gear done consistently? Like, we're not necessarily worried about everybody else. We need StickStar, Dallas Select, Texas United gear done on time, right? And for a long time, it was a competitive advantage. It was, what is the new kit going to look like, right? And we have had lots of great kits. And now it's, as the business continues to evolve, you know, you go to stickstarlacrosse.com right now and you go to the team
What's that?
sales.
What's that URL? What's that website?
Stickstarlacrosse.com.
.com.
That's right.
StickStarLacrosse.
That's that new. That's that new hotness that we got out there. I mean, it's fantastic, and we make great gear. It's unique, identifiable, it's consistent, and it's quality over time, and that's tough to do. So yeah, we'll talk.
This thing's kind of taken a left turn. But I think that all of that comes back to kind of like what you're doing with Second Slide is like you're trying to provide solutions to an issue, right? Or to issues for programs.
Well, and yeah, sorry to go back. Is this going to lead back to like board turnover?
No, I mean what I was gonna say is that like that's really the core of like our team sales is like we want it to be a super easy process. Like, and having been in the shoes of the person that got their gear late and wrong, and this doesn't look anything like the art. Like, that's why we've been able to be successful with our team sales is because we are the manufacturer. You're talking to someone that's one person removed. Like you're not going to have to go through 15 different layers to figure out where your gear is and all of that. It's like we are providing the solution, which is the total headache that comes with being a program trying to organize your team's uniform order for the season. So
well, and it's we have an average turnaround time when you click order on our website. It's on your door in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's really good.
We there are certain limitations with that, and that's a strategic operation on our part. But I just had such an issue with team stores open on this date and closed on this date. Well, why is it closed? What if a kid joins one day after the team store closes? You're saying he can't get gear for 6 months? Like, just the supportive mom who's excited about her kid. Kid moves, military kid moves into San Diego, military kid moves into Texas, like no gear. That didn't sit right with me. And then, again, going back to incentives, a lot of these team stores are like, we are optimizing for us to make money off of your community. And like, again, just we're gonna bundle it up, and then once we have the payments, like it's 6 weeks out, and now I can't get a hold of the guy that was trying to run this whole thing. So like, even to have 1 degree of separation, to have your phone number, like it's sad, but it's advantageous that we get to actually provide solutions. I would say.
Right.
So how long does it take to get a case of balls?
Depends on your geographic location. We have this nifty little chart, but usually they're there within a week, depending on when we process the order, how far it needs to travel. And built in, what's nice too is built into the cost is shipping. So listen, if you live within reason, if you live in the contiguous 48, it's going to be $185 for 120. And it's, what I think is the neatest is we have the ball rolling. But let's fast forward a decade. If we're handling in a crazy optimistic, if we're handling half of the ball orders, right? First off, drinks on me, fellas. We're going out for a round on the town.
Right.
But again, we get to apply that leverage back to the manufacturer and say, hey, listen, here's what we're sourcing this at because you manufacture balls for 3 different brands. It's all the same shit. Like removing that cloak, your ball is their ball, and their ball is the other team's ball. We have X amount of business. You either give us the best price or we go shopping. So driving that down, which means that at some point it's not going to be $185. It'll be $165, $160, $55. Like, how low can you go when you have that baseball bat of aggregate purchasing power to essentially threaten companies with? Like, we are representing millions of dollars of purchases. What are you going to do so that we can pass along this benefit? Because all we're doing is taking a subscription and passing along these orders. What are you going to do to earn this millions and millions of dollars? And
all I hear right now is a challenge. All I hear is a challenge of how many programs can we get on board for this program.
It's the simplest program
that's,
on planet Earth.
that's all I hear right now. Like when you're saying like, hey, we have 100 programs. All I hear is, Anthony, this is a challenge. Like, can we get to 200? Can we get to 300? You know,
That's the great challenge.
I think that's, you know, the message that we need to promote. I mean, one of the messages from this amazing discussion, but I think that, you know, challenge accepted.
Mhm.
Like, you know, this is easy. We need to get more programs involved with this program so that it benefits everybody.
Mhm.
Because the lacrosse ball, like, I know Plano West needs lacrosse balls. Talked about it today.
Mhm.
You know, so that is a significant cost for a lot of programs. And if you can drive that number down, you know, maybe it drives up the amount that you can pay the coaches. You know, I don't know.
Yeah,
And
do something.
That's right.
I'm curious about the team stores, going back to that, like artwork, all of that, like who sets all of that up? You guys have artists in-house that it's like, okay, here's our designs for your team store, right? Like for your shirts, your pint glasses, like you said, you've got all of this stuff. How does that process work when someone's, hey, we're gonna pay you the subscription, we're in, like
Yeah.
now getting the actual designs and the store set up, like
So the process is fairly simple. You would go to our website, you would pay, and then the burden of the actual logos themselves falls on the team.
Yeah.
Like, we're smart guys, we're not designers at heart.
Right.
And if you tell me what's my best guess of what kids thinks are cool, I think the dab is still cool. Like, I'm not in the game of trying to design you your team's logo.
Right.
Right.
Because I feel like people will be, well, this logo sucks. Well, why did we even do this?
yeah,
So you provide us your team's logo, which 99% of the time you already have.
Sure.
We can make adjustments like add lacrosse, take away sticks, or add
Right.
crossing sticks. And then we have core products, which is right around 100 products of right down the middle of the fairway.
sure,
And we send you this product list and ask that you hop on a call with us, so that you're saying, hey, I looked at the product list, we want that type of t-shirt, that type of hoodie, those sweats, that pint glass, that blanket, that wine tumbler, that AirPods case. You can kind of get creative because we've removed ourselves from the profit of that. We can kind of source as long as it's made on demand and of high quality.
sure,
And we just apply the logos that you gave us, usually 3 at a time. You have unlimited logo usage for us. If you have 5 logos, let's have 3, and then let's swap in 2 every quarter or 2 every month. And on this final onboarding call, you're just telling me what items you want, what base colors you want, what logos you want, and how you want the store looking. So, we actually work with the Fort Worth Youth Lacrosse Association. So, like, their store, they have their logo up top, like their team roster picture that's kind of blurry that you scroll past to get to all the goods. And included in that store, we have something called the gear closet, which includes that case of balls. It also includes cones, ladders, a smaller package of balls. We work with Elevate Sports to have like an inflatable goalie and an inflatable defenseman. What we envision that being is the baseball bat that we take to the equipment industry. Starting with balls, but again, I mean, I don't think it's any surprise that lacrosse equipment is so expensive when so many people are making money off of the sale of a piece of equipment. Whether that's a helmet, gloves, we were talking about shafts before we started recording. You're telling me a piece of metal's, $185. What did that cost? How many people are making money off that transaction? So even just like, with the ball thing, we want teams to think of us as more of an e-commerce partner than the traditional team store. So we'll update it intermittently. Hey, our bread and butter is getting logos and selling the same day at no inventory risk. Make a rivalry t-shirt. Throw 2023 on it so it's a collectible. As the summer hits, we'll add tank tops and swim trunks. The first variation that we did of this was every logo that we had, and we were only at like 15 stores at the time. We added the Wells Crowther red bandana pattern over all of the logos. So it would have been like a Sun Valley Lacrosse logo, but it would have been red, where it's traditionally blue, in that font. And we donated all the proceeds to Wells Crowther Trust.
Wow.
We did a Black Friday, Cyber Monday push because, again, going back to incentives, it's in our best interest if your store crushes. We don't want you to lift a finger, and we want to have mom going, you know what, that's a cool gingerbread holding a lacrosse stick mug. I'm going to order that for Christmas. We want the dad going, that's a cool Wells Crowther pint glass. We want that just to have around because I appreciate and know the story. And again, send us a logo and we'll put it on a shirt at no inventory risk. It sells one. You know, hey, come on, don't
Yeah.
up that number. What are you
That's
doing?
right.
Did you even send it out
Yeah.
on an email?
Yeah.
If you sell 100, your program just made $1,000.
Right.
And the final point that I'll say is transparency is very crucial to what we do, as I feel like you. Like even just saying, we work with the guy. Like
Right.
there's not, we gotta work with that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy. We send you the list of the margin. We send you what we get it for, what we recommend you sell it for, the margin baked into the margin percentage. So our store runs all day at about 30% margin. But we send you these items and it's like, listen, that hoodie has $10 built in and is still reasonably priced. Like, did that ticker go off in your head of, we've been getting screwed for
Right.
the last 20 years? You know, packing out my parents' house when they were getting ready to move. Wheat Ridge hoodie, Wheat Ridge t-shirt, Wheat Ridge hat, Wheat Ridge beanie, Wheat Ridge sweats, Wheat Ridge jersey. And Wheat Ridge folded. There's no Wheat Ridge lacrosse program that I can support. And when I was in the PLL and when I was in the, playing professional lacrosse, I'm listening to all these these MIA guys, oh, I went back and did a clinic, and I'm like, well, go Farmers.
What happened? Why did it fold?
It was two factors. I think one was,
Because this happens a lot,
yeah,
where programs will just cease to exist, and it seems like it can happen like in the
Quickly.
blink of an eye. Like it seems like a lot of programs are like right on this line, and it could just fall off the cliff at any moment.
the way that it was explained to me, and I didn't do my due diligence, so this is mostly what I heard, was the general lacrosse community in the area. So there's like Wheat Ridge, Arvada, like a couple surrounding towns. Their boards weren't on the same page. So Wheat Ridge needed to pull from 5 different high schools just to field one team that we would just get smoked by
Right.
Cherry Creek. Because we pulled from 5 schools, everybody kind of needs to be on the same page. Everybody needs to be pushing the ball forward in the same direction. A school one town over goes, we're actually going to start a lacrosse program. And right on the other side, this sounds neat, let's start this program. So now instead of one playoff worthy team, and this was before, I'm speaking before it split into 2 divisions, Wheat Ridge won the state championship of the division that didn't include any of the good teams, so I don't even consider that a state win. But because these teams weren't pushing the ball forward for the sport of lacrosse, and they wanted their son from Ralston Valley or their son from Lakewood to play on their team, now we have Ralston Valley and Lakewood who aren't quality programs, not to the status that Wheat Ridge was. So it's a bummer. It's a bummer that I don't have the Wheat Ridge team to support. I'd love to work with them in some capacity. I've obviously since moved on to Idaho, which has its own slew of problems, but I just think it's
Challenges.
representative of shit. That wasn't probably the best strategic move for the growth of the sport.
Yeah, well, at least it didn't happen in Notre Dame, because the Bulldogs,
Yeah.
we no longer have a college program, which is also very difficult. But, we still got the couple of Cowboys. We're still fighting hard there.
Yeah, well, how is the, I'm just curious, like in that situation, how's the youth lacrosse set up? Because I'm ignorant to how Denver youth lacrosse works. Is it like one massive city league, or does each community have its own like kind of little insulated league locally?
Yeah, so there are some pretty big leagues that have, like the system that I grew up with was called the Blizzard, now it's called the Storm.
Okay.
Very well ran, very, good fundraising efforts. I was like a part of the first or second year that ever existed. So we were just kind of scraping it together. And it's since turned into this conglomerate of all these areas that I was just talking about where these high schools are bickering. There's essentially one youth program that is the top dog, that is well organized, that has coaches from first all the way up to 8th grade before they go into high school. And it's just a matter of where from this youth program are they funneling to the high school program.
Do those kids in the youth play like their spring season? Are they playing within that group, or are they playing teams from all over the city of Denver?
They're playing teams from all over the city of
Okay.
Denver. Like
Interesting.
our rivalry was against Boulder.
Uh-huh.
You know, Boulder Valley. Like it was the funniest. Like we're getting hyped up and we're in 3rd grade. And my dad's like, "You guys are legends."
Yeah.
But it's a well organized league as well. Again, speaking historically, I guess I haven't.
But is it
seen
it's
anything.
specific to that quadrant of the city, or is it the entire city?
It was the entire city. So like,
Okay.
and I think that there
Did you
was.
guys play like Cherry Creek as well? And
Yeah,
is there, like-
so we would play, I believe the way that the scheduling was done was we would play the side of town that was closer to us. Like,
Right.
the scheduling made sense geographically. And then at the end of the year, there was the Jamboree,
Right.
which every team came and you played like 5 games over the course of the weekend and were crowned, the state
Right.
champ. But
Yeah.
we weren't traveling ridiculous
Distance.
distance,
Yeah.
an hour at the most.
Right.
When there were places, Denver's obviously the Mecca. So we
Yeah.
were lucky that teams from Boulder, teams from Colorado Springs, or 90% of the time had to come to us.
Right.
So,
That's one of the biggest things that we're, working through is, what is necessary for competition,
mhm.
right? Plano is one, I don't know how many cities there are that have 3 programs in the same city.
Mhm.
In Plano, there's Plano West, there's Plano Central, and there's Plano East.
Mhm.
Like, what is there? Is there another city that has 3 programs out of it?
Not that I can.
Maybe
come up
like
with-
like
off the top of my
what
head.
Cypress United
Yeah,
like-
but even that sounds like they have kind of
come together,
united.
right? Yeah, they sure did. And so what does the initial lacrosse experience have to look like? If a beginner comes and plays, like the way that we look at it is lacrosse needs to be rec,
Mhm.
right? Select is one thing, but rec select is something else, right? Where you're traveling across the city. Well, when you play like middle school football, middle school basketball, you don't like go nuts, right?
Mhm.
Like the first time I played Highland Park was when I was in high school,
Right.
right? So how can you change the experience and make everything more efficient in terms of, look, I'm not driving to South Lake from Allen and playing there all day,
Uh-huh.
right? I need this to be convenient.
Specifically, as I'm trying to grow the Frisco program, we've taken kindergarten through 4th largely in-house, so we'll
Mhm.
play each other throughout the spring.
Right.
And we'll play in like a 5-on-5 format on a smaller field. I'm super excited about it, but the main driver of that change for us, there's a couple of them, but the main one was that for somebody to try the sport in the 2nd grade, we were asking them for like a 12-week commitment
Mhm.
where you might have to spend 5 hours on a Saturday to play lacrosse,
Right.
driving to the other part of the Metroplex.
Mhm.
So it felt like that was a barrier. Another barrier,
I'm running into that in Idaho right now. In a similar way, Boise's the Mecca, and there are other areas of town. Sandpoint lacrosse. That's a 7-hour drive to get to Boise. Like, people don't realize how tall and skinny Boise is. I certainly won't complain about drive times. Like, if you had to play San Antonio, that's 10 hours. Like, Texas is a massive, massive state. And there's all this headbutting going on of, well, you should just come to Boise because that's where all the lacrosse is. Well, if Sandpoint has to travel to Boise 4, 5, 6, 7 times a year for games,
how are you going to grow it? It's
that
super
ain't gonna work.
inconvenient. I can play baseball down the street.
Mhm.
I can play basketball in my backyard. I can play I-9 flag football locally,
Mhm.
you know, and then as we look around these cities that we're in, like the other youth sports programs are gigantic. They have great participation. There's no shortage of athletes playing these other sports. So we're just trying to take a local approach to see if that has an impact on growth and retention at the smaller ages, because it has in some places like Highland Park.
I have to imagine it does, especially if like I
Highland
think
Park's Bantam, I think, has like 300 kids.
Really?
Kindergarten through second.
good for them.
And all they do, kindergarten, first, second, all they do is play in-house. Hylax down in Houston does something similar in-house at their younger ages. Massive program. They feed 3 or 4 high schools, something like that. So, yeah, just again, as we were talking about growth, it seems like the current model as it stands seems to be prohibitive in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And there's some barriers that I think that we can knock down. Eventually, I could see a world where we have local in-house, so to speak, and then teams that would also play in the citywide league at
Yeah.
that age as well.
And I think that people are generally conditioned to think of youth lacrosse in a particular way. We are not football. We are not baseball. We are not soccer. So like one of the things I'm going to try and propose at Sandpoint is saying something like, hey, Spokane, Washington is an hour away. Like, do things in-house, run sixes, run 3-by. Like, get kids to associate the word lacrosse with fun is honestly sometimes the biggest draw. And sitting in a car for 7 hours to go get your dicks kicked in by a Boise team that is way better is not fun for anybody. It's not fun for the parents. It's not fun for Sandpoint. So to your point, I think like there's just this entire market, and it's almost difficult to speak on, of new approaches to youth lacrosse that get kids having fun, that don't put a total burden on parents, that is going to upset the old heads, where it's like, that's not what happens when they get to 10-on-10 lacrosse and they don't even know the rules. Then we'll teach them the rules. It's, kids are smarter than people give them credit for. And if you develop a skill set playing 3-by with tennis balls and women's lacrosse sticks, imagine how much fun it's going to be teaching them, men's lacrosse with helmets and contact and step-down shooting.
Right.
Well, it's just the perspective, like the perspective of the beginner has nothing to do with the perspective of like whoever's been watching it. You can make it whatever you want to.
It was a fatal mistake we made early on in the coaching days. We left some communities and we talked about how'd they like it. Honestly, my kid didn't like it that much because we were putting them in like ground ball drills and partner passing, and then we just were like, you know what, scrap everything. Who wants to see how high I can throw the ball?
Right.
Who do you think can catch Coach Brent in a race?
Right.
How'd you like the clinic? They are wondering how they can play lacrosse again tomorrow.
Right.
And it's like, man, you just forget that kids are kids.
Yeah, they got to be able to play, right?
Yeah.
Like the play is how they learn. It's they experimenting, failing, figuring out what works. That's how kids' brains work for learning anything.
Well, yeah, give kids
Give them a basketball and a hoop, and there's going to be some really good hoopers. You go, to the neighborhoods in Central and South America, and those kids are some of the best soccer players in the world, and they're not being coached; they're just playing.
Just
right?
Watch recess.
Yeah.
And then tell me that kids need structure. Like you let a group of kids out on a jungle gym, it's the beautiful chaos of the entire universe condensed into, a 45-minute session outside. So that was a fatal mistake we made. And if anybody's listening to this, don't put first and second graders in partner passing. Get them in have them play floor hockey. Get them playing. Don't be like, oh, here's where you hold your hand, here's where this for 30 minutes in a row. Teach them as they play. That doesn't answer any what will grow the game.
No, but
it does kind of.
I think
No,
it
it
does
does.
in a lot of ways because you want kids need context and a kid that's a second or third grade player that's naturally athletic for his age, if he comes in, like he doesn't want to stand there and listen to all the things you were just talking about, right? Like let's let this kid get up and down and run free and be an athlete and chase a ball. I always say, like, if you took a group of 15 kids to a field, and before you ever got the players there, you just put a pile of sticks and a couple balls and then a net or two, like they'll figure out how to play some sort of game. They'll self-organize and they'll figure out a way to
It's beautiful to
kind of
watch.
start playing. It's amazing. But it's really hard as adults and coaches to kind of step back and let that be messy, right? Like, let that look really bad.
And
The fact is that if a drill looks really good at the second and third grade level, that's not a good drill, and they're not getting anything out of it.
Couldn't possibly agree more. And a fatal mistake coaches try to make is, not realizing that kids are retaining 5% of what you tell them. Like, hey, if you're going to talk, understand that you need to be efficient with your words, especially with young kids. Like, they're going to listen to two things that you say. So they're not going to remember anything about the form on ground ball, the form on passing, how to catch a ball. They are going to remember, who wants to chase me? They're going to be like, oh, that, like, there's just, kids' brains are beautifully complex and simple and stupid and brilliant all at the same time.
I think that we are the sworn enemy of groupthink, the status quo, and just like stock development at StickStar. And that's why we do so many things different. I think that from a coaching standpoint, kids do have a really tough time with instruction and long-windedness. I think the only exception is when you ask them questions.
Yeah.
And that's something that we do all the time. We are constantly asking questions because then the questions create the knowledge and the questions create the consistency. So now the kids, when they have it's a repetitive question, they will answer. Not everybody. Some of them will get it, and then another layer will get it. So now when you're communicating and you're asking these questions, these kids have these answers to these lacrosse questions, and it's super unique. So shout out the Socratic method. I think we've covered a lot of ground here. I don't know what other direction we could go, and I don't know from a recording bandwidth standpoint where we're at in the process. So,
And I got a 6 a.m. flight here.
Yeah, because
it was
he's
7
working.
Waking up at 6
earlier,
a.m.
so
Yeah.
sounds like this is changing a
3
lot.
a.m., yeah. That was a lie. It's a 7:30. It's a 7:30 flight.
Ish.
So,
So there's an
Ish.
ish in there.
I just
Ish.
lied. Kids don't lie.
I would really like to at some point get more into the coaching and philosophy of coaching kids with you at some point, but because we're out of time, but I think that's a whole nother episode.
Oh no,
at
I'm
some
only
point.
here for a couple more weeks. So
Oh,
we got some
Yeah.
time to get episode
And
2.
just in case you didn't know, he is a professional box lacrosse broadcaster.
Yes, that's true.
Is
Yeah.
that where you're flying out to tomorrow?
Yes.
What do you got
Flying out
going
to
on?
San Diego. It's a little
San Diego.
You've heard of ESPN 2, right?
Yep.
The
Yeah.
Ocho.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's
Who the Seals got this weekend?
the Saskatchewan Rush.
All right.
It's a big test for them. Mark Matthews and Robert Church, the two pillars of an offense that was so lethal and so dynamic and so dominant for many years in the NLL. Have their best lacrosse years been played? Are they still a legitimate contender for the NLL Cup? Tune in on Friday, 7:30 Pacific time, and find out.
And they're Tendy. He's a new favorite, isn't he?
Bouquet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He just had his his whole
Yeah.
post game out there.
He was my teammate on the Mammoth. He's a character. for
Absolute
sure.
beauty.
So, well, thanks for having me, gentlemen.
Thank you for
Appreciate
coming.
it. First of many discussions.
First
here.
guest on the StickStar
That's big.
Report
We-
2.0.
Little thing we like to call precedent. I'm Anthony Crimmins,
Kyle Saunders.
Nick Ossello.
and we'll see you really soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Nick. That was awesome.
Blast, fellas. How about that?
That
One
went,
time.
that
One
went a
take.
while.
One time.
That went a while.
One time. That's how we do
really
that,
good.
One take, Dave.
right? Some good flow there.
Dude, anytime.
That was sick.
It's fun to actually